Shalom Haverim. Shalom Haverim. What an opportunity for me to loosen my chains a little and be able to reach out to you from here, from the heart of the carbon region, deep in the carbon region, surrounded by the hills of the Shenandoah Valley here in the heart of Pennsylvania, home of the Molly Maguires. And there's this is a very particular place. I can look out my window and see the cold mountains in the area, and it's just, there's a feel of the 18th century here. The land smells like the 18th century. I can smell the blood, and I can smell the people that were here not long ago in the 17th and 18th century. So it's a pleasure for me to be able to reach out to you. Some of you, I love your pokes, and I love some of your questions, and some of you are so intelligent, and some of you, especially those of you that are proceeding to educate and revive yourselves, you're the real motivation that I have for coming on the internet. All you Jewish people and you Gentiles out there that are seeking holiness, to define holiness within yourselves and bring holiness into the world. And I have several observations here that I have for you. And I got one of you, you're a rabbi, and you asked me about my methodology about how to speak to Christians. With Christians, I have a very specific custom methodology that I use to speak to Christians. And in a way, I'm a little tricky when I speak to Christians, and I mean, not tricky, but I have certain tricky. And I don't want to say it this way on the internet, because then the Christians that I'm speaking to, they'll figure out what I'm doing with them. But 50% of the problem that Christians have, 50% is getting them to read their own New Testament. Alright? This is from my perspective. This is the problem that I have. If I can get Christians to read their own New Testament, I'm specifically talking about the letters of the Gospels. If I could get the Christians to read their own New Testament, a lot of their idolatry would be solved. Because the fact is, a lot of Christians don't read the New Testament. Or they read it through the eyes of their pastors. They read it through the eyes of their denominations. They don't read the New Testament from an objective point of view. And I have found in my experience that once I get Christians to focus on the Gospels, a lot of the idolatry that they're in, actually they start realizing it and they start abandoning it. Okay? Because there are a lot of Christians that are sincere and really want to follow the Derek Hashem. I have a certain way to deal with them, and if I could talk to you face to face, I could describe to you the methodology that I use to speak to Christians. But I find that most Christians, if they read the Bible on their own 20 minutes a week, that would be a lot. It would be a lot. And they misunderstand the New Testament because you have the Gospels and you have the letters of Paul. These are two completely different types of documents, written far apart by men who never saw each other, men who had different missions. Because the mission of Paul, as you know, he was the outreach to the Gentiles of his time, right? And he had a very specific way of talking about holiness and talking about God and stuff to the Gentiles. The man from Nazareth had a completely different mission. His was a no Gentile movement. I mean, regular Judaism accepted Gentiles, converted Gentiles, but the man from Nazareth, he spoke very clearly that his movement was for the Jewish people, by the Jewish people, and for the Jewish people. And his whereas Paul preached Christ crucified, the message of Rabbi of Nazareth was to present his form of holiness, his methodology to obtain holiness among the Jews, which had its basis on Hitler's technology. And I heard some of you actually debating on whether he was a rabbi or not. I mean, Pharisee or not. Listen, a lot of Jews are not ready to say that he was a Pharisee because that entails a lot. All right. But anybody that knows about the 7 rules of Hillel and the 32 rules of Hillel, and you open the New Testament, it's all over the place. It's very evident that the man of Nazareth was a Pharisee. Okay? So, this is academic. I don't argue about obvious things. People take positions based on their own political and paycheck at the end of the week type of situations. Good luck to them, how they stand before the Hashem. I actually had some questions about some of you about the Anusim. There are a lot of secret Jewish societies spread out through Latin America, and I know about some of them. Okay, I know about some of them, particularly in Cuba, Santo Domingo, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. In Argentina, there's secret societies, and a lot of these secret Jews want to remain secret, which I don't agree with. We're living at a time when all Jews, the Anusim, and whoever you are, you have to come and return, if possible, to Israel, and most certainly return to the Torah, to community among those that keep the Torah. But the information on on how you can locate the Anusim in your society, it's kind of a delicate situation unless you're converting, and that information I could give it to you if we were talking face to face. But just to give you a few hints, a lot of Portuguese, Spanish Jews leaving from Spain, they camouflage their use of candles by becoming Catholics, right? And some of them by becoming botanists, working with plants, healing with plants. And some of them passed as white witches. Some of them passed as, people who taught witchcraft, just to camouflage their use of candles and their use of praying and using herbs at certain times of the year and stuff like that. And that's how they camouflage themselves. All right? And unfortunately, after a certain amount of different generations, some of them forgot the Hebrew that they had and actually adopted what they were doing. Some of them actually became witches and warlocks and stuff, right? They forgot their Hebrew and continued into they became their facade. But today, if you go among the Anusim, there's a lot of, if you speak to people in those communities, they will be able to tell you. I had a question from somebody who had interest in genealogy, and your name is Carvalho, and so we're family. Just for example, it's very easy. There's certain things about Jewish genealogy that regular genealogists will not know what to look for. For example, if your name is Caraballo, just read it from right to left, right? From right to left. You'll read Oila Barak, right? The blessing, and this is a hint. The Anusim wanted to change their names, but they wanted to change their names in a way that later on their generations will be able to figure it out. Right? So if you read Oila Barak, the blessing of the burnt offering, these were of course the sons of Aaron, the butchers of the Mishkan and stuff. And that's how you can go to Sephardim.com and you can look up your name there, and you can go to the Jewish Encyclopedia for that specific name. There's a long history to that name. And these, of course, are the Montefiores of today and the whole genealogy with the Rothschilds and stuff. That family is involved with that. But you can start there if you want. Study your own genealogy. Yeah, some of you were asking me about questions of the temple, and I talked to you that I really cannot give you a systematic study into the Mishkan or the Hamikdash because this medium doesn't allow it. Right? The Mishkan was a very audio-visual phenomenon that Hashem created for the people of the Jews, and today, if you're studying it, if you don't have the actual Mishkan, you need a model. It's an audio-visual phenomenon to be able to understand it. But I could give you some notions. I can give you some hints that can start you on the way to studying. For example, a lot of people approach the study of the Torah and the Mishkan in a scholastic mode, and that can be very dangerous because the Mishkan and the Torah, those are not just regular texts. All right, those are texts that have a certain presence, a certain spiritual presence around it. And that's hard to believe. Just take my word for it. If you approach it simply from a scholastic point of view, you can get cursed. So you have to be aware of this. All right. But for example, when there's the Mishkan is an oracle, and it has its own language, it has its own voice, and the idea is you want the Mishkan to speak to you. You want it to be able to talk to you, instead of you trying to interpret what it's saying. Just ask yourself, right? For example, in the Kodesh, what three furnitures or items are there? Right? And you'll say the menorah, which stands in the south. You'll say the gold altar, which stands in the center, right? Toward the front. And then you'll say the shulchan of Hamoti, the table of showbread, which is on the right side. So it faces north. It's very important to know the south, west, east directions of where things are in the Mishkan. Well, which one of these three items in the holy place appears in the court? Which one of these three items appears in the court? And you're going to say the altar, of course, right? You got the altar of gold in the Mishkan, and then you got the altar of brass in the court. And you're going to say, but that's the only thing. But wait, that's just the primer. If you know about encryption and how to figure encryption, you got to locate the primer. And the altar is the primer. But you're going to say to me, but Al, that's the only thing that they have in common. There's no shulchan, there's no table of bread in the court. There's no menorah in the court. Well, wait, not so fast. All right? Okay, let's go to the holy place, right? The table of bread, what is it? It's food, right? It's something to be consumed. If it's a consumable, well, go to the court and ask yourself, was there any food there? Was there any consumable there? Yes, in the north of the court, there was an area where food was prepared for the altar, and that food was the body of the animals, right? There was shech there. And the blood was caught, and the priest would grab the blood of the animal, and he would press his hand, he would lean on the head of the animal, and he would confess the sins of Israel, and the animal would be shecht, slaughtered, and then the blood would be caught, right? So the food for the altar was prepared there, so there you go. Even though you don't have the shulchan hamotzi there, you have an area where food was prepared. And now you're going to say, but wait, Al, there's no candlestick in the court. Right? Well, not so fast. Just ask yourself this question. What did the candlestick do in the holy place? It gave light. Right? It destroyed darkness. Right? Well, what does the laver do? It destroys tumah. Right? So here you have now, it destroys tumah. The laver is actually, so what did I just tell you? The candlestick or the menorah destroys darkness, and the laver destroys tumah. So tumah is darkness. You see how that sentence popped up there? That's what I mean when I tell you that the Mishkan has its own language. You can get sentences from the Mishkan, and you can get actually prophecy and timelines from the Mishkan if you let Mishkan talk on its own. If you try to interpret it, that's when you can get mixed up. But so there you go. The three items of the holy place do appear in the court. And when you look at the ark, the three items are also in the ark, right? It's easier to see. What's the primer? What's the primer in the ark, in the aron? There's hamotzi there, which corresponds to the shulchan hamotzi of the holy place, right? All right. And you're gonna tell me, but wait, there's no menorah. There's no menorah in the aron, right? But what is? There's a stick of wood, isn't there? And what was the menorah? It was a tree. It was sticks of wood. It was right. It had knobs like a tree. So there you go. So what is commonly called the Decalogue, or the Ten Commandments, corresponds to the altar. So there you have the three elements. And of course, if we go back to the holy place, a simple way that we can analyze these things, in the holy place you have three items, right? You have the Mishkan, you have the altar, and then you have the table of bread. And if you express this algebraically, you can express it algebraically as A plus B plus C, right? And another way you can express it algebraically is by saying 1/3 A plus 1/3 B plus 1/3 C, okay? And of course, remember that the Kodesh was actually part of the Ohel Moed, the tent of the appointment. So if you want to add the ark to that calculation, then it would be either A plus B plus C plus D, or 1/4 A plus 1/4 B plus 1/4 C plus 1/4 D. Right? I'm forgetting my algebra, but that's an algebraic form. And remember that the Ohel Moed was actually part of the entire Mishkan. So if you want to add, if you want to form a complete equation and add the three items of the Azorah, the court, to the equation, that you would have a total of 4 items in the Ohel Moed, and you will have 3 items in the Mishkan, which would be 7. And of course you could express that expression as A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F plus G. I think I did it right. Or 1/7 A plus 1/7 B, 1/7 C, etc., etc., etc. And these are just a number of simple algebraic equations, right, that will allow you. But what's if you're a mathematician, the next thing you can ask me, but you're going to say, but wait, what's on the equal sign? The equal sign on the other side of all these equations represents the atonement. There are many different types of atonement in the Mishkan, and each of these equations will describe a certain type of atonement. For example, in the court, there's a certain type of atonement, all right? And in the court, you had magistrates walking, right? Heavenly beings that walked in the court, but you had regular human beings, of course, right? So the court corresponds to the earth, and this is where, for you Christians that are studying the Mishkan, this is where the atonement of your Lord and Savior, this is where it develops among the priests and Paul. They all describe the atonement of the man from Nazareth from the court. But why am I telling you that? Because I want to open your mind to let you understand Paul couldn't finish his work to describe to you that there are other sorts of sources of atonement. There's the atonement of the holy place, and then there's the atonement of the Kodesh HaKodeshim, which only the great Aleph himself can do. Please remember what I'm just telling you. In other words, Paul was able to describe certain things to you, but remember the message that you got from Paul. Paul was talking basically to a starting Gentile church. Yeah, he went a little bit into it. He started going a little bit into the book of Hebrews through his Priscilla. And he wanted to go into more, but of course time did not permit, and maybe some of his works were destroyed. And he told you, right, of whom we have many things to say and hard to explain. He wanted to go on explaining, right, but they lived in troublous times, so he couldn't really go into the temple. He went a little bit into it, but he couldn't really get into the nitty-gritty. And maybe we can solve that. Maybe I can give you some of the answers that are missing from the New Testament. As you re-embrace the children of Israel, this is going to be a symbiotic blessing. Not only will the Christian community bless the Jewish people, but the Jewish people will bless the Jewish community. The Jewish people will bless the Gentile community as well by being able to give you some of this information and helping you evolve the gospel. See, the gospel is 2,000 years old. And it's true, things don't change, but things evolve, right? Things evolve, right? But Christianity went through a 1,000-year period of darkness, and you couldn't. The book of Acts should be like 15 volumes by now, but it's not, right? Because of the great darkness where the earth was covered, spiritual darkness, and Christianity, and the New Testament was almost practically stamped out. By the way, excuse me, but anyway. I'm getting deviated there a little bit. So I gave you a little equation. We went into a little algebraic format there of the Mishkan, and we can go into it in a more advanced form another time if Hashem provides us the medium. Some of you had some questions about, some Jewish people had some questions about Christians. Listen. I got a lot of ammo that I can give you to help dismantle Christians and Christianity and a lot of the idolatry that they're involved in. Okay. But, instead of me doing that, I'm going to just tell you to use your love. Just use your love. Alright? Instead of arguing with them. Alright? Time will permit us one day to present these arguments. But, just use your love, and you'll be able to get to where you want with Christians. And one of you, a rabbi was asking me, young rabbi was asking me how you can work with Christians, right? Remember, some Christians, not all, but some are in idolatry, and there's only a certain amount of help that you can give them. But a very good way to help them is, for example, just look around your community. Look for a congregation of 200 and 300 Gentiles, Christians. And just go up to the pastor and say, listen, I want to be part of your efforts to bless the community. Do you mind if I taught Hebrew in your church? And before you know it, you'll have 10 to 20 people wanting to learn Hebrew. And once you're there, you could make a little money, charge them $5 each to teach. And even though it doesn't sound like a lot of money, 20 people, that's $100 an hour. Divided into 4, let's say you teach 4 consecutive Sundays, that's $25 an hour. That's nothing to shake a stick at. Right? So you could start there. And if you have multiple classes, then you can take, then you can make it a little business for yourself, and you can bless them too. And you can teach Greek. Greek is very easy to learn, by the way. I can teach anybody to read Greek in like 6 days. So you can learn the Greek and teach the Hebrew, and later on teach the Greek. All right? Teach them, because a lot of the problems with idolatry is, there's a lot of ammunition in the New Testament to help Christians, but Christians don't read their New Testament. Christians don't read the Bible. Okay? And so that's a project for you that you can work on. And there's a lot of different ideas that you could cooperate with your local church in blessing them and blessing the community too. Somebody was asking me about the blood moon. This is the first time I used this camera. Let me check if the camera is recording. Yep, still is. Alright, they just think, alright. You have the Yom Kippur year, right? The Yom Kippur year last 360 some odd days, at the end of which there is an event of blood. The same thing with the moon, right? The moon lasts for 30 days, and at the end of the 30 days, there's an event of blood, right? The blood moon, right? And just think about it a minute. Just think about it for 1 second. When is the menstrual moon or the blood moon most important in the life of a couple? When you want to have a baby, right? You have a baby, you're waiting for the day to see if she'll skip the menstrual moon, right? And suddenly she skips it, and you know that there's a Messiah. There's a child on the way, or there's an atonement on the way, right? But instead of having the baby, if there's blood, if she bleeds, instead of skipping the dead, instead of bringing in the new moon and bringing in the Messiah, she has an event of blood, then you know that the baby, she's not pregnant, right? That's why the blood moon or the menstrual moon is a bad omen, because it talks about judgment, not a, right? And it talks, it's a negativity. There's no atonement. There's a, and now this is the problem when you study the Mishkan. The blood moon is part of the entire Mishkan thing. All right, you can't divorce these items from the Mishkan. In the Mishkan, you have lessons, but one lesson goes into another one. It's like Greek. Greek doesn't have any commas, dots. There's no spaces. It's like one continuous line. And in the Mishkan, you're going to have a lot of these concepts showing up, and you have to just get the concept and just learn how to cut off the concept. Don't continue extending the concept, because then you get mixed up. Right? So there you go. I gave you a little idea of what the moon is. What is the blood moon? What is the menstrual moon? Just put it in your head and learn it before you continue, because it's deeper than that. It's more profound than that. Okay? And so that's just a little, I just want to give you a little bit about that. Anyway, with all the things happening in Israel, and I'm going to ask the religious community in Israel to prepare, and just prepare yourselves. And I know it sounds impossible that the government of Israel might collapse. It sounds like an impossibility, right? But you have to be ready for that event. There's a lot of events that can lead to the collapse of the government of Israel. And you have to prepare as if it's going to collapse. Okay? You have to prepare for the religious community in Israel, you have to prepare to defend yourselves against the government. Israel government wants to collapse. The Israel government is controlled by appeasement. Right? It's beholden to the interests outside of itself. It has the holiness for the Jewish people is very low on their priorities list, and it's very, very. You have to know this, and this may cause Hashem to make it to collapse. So you have to be ready. You have to be ready to defend yourselves and to establish a government based on Torah. Okay, the problem that you're having with the Arabs there, that call themselves Palestinian, if you had a government that was based on Torah, you wouldn't have that problem, because they would have their place in Jewish society, right? And I remember when I was in Latin America, one of the years that I was there, the government of United States, they actually repatriated like 2,000 people from the jails and sent them to that country where I was. And overnight, there were murders, there were thieves. I mean, the crime rate went through the roof. All these people coming out of American jails and being repatriated back into the country. And it was insanity. Right? And the police and military, for 30 days, they just sat back and they watched very carefully who was doing the killing and who was doing the stealing. And the day of judgment came. They got 30 to 40 units of police, led by one man, because not all the police, killing is a skill. Not everybody, not every policeman can kill. So they put one policeman that was capable of killing in the group, and they went around to the houses where the troublemakers were, and they killed 300 of them. Most of them would try to run out the window and they would get shot, and they would try to resist or something and they would get killed. And I remember seeing pickup trucks filled with people, like being thrown into the pickup trucks. And 48 hours later, that was it. That was the end of the Intifada in that country. It ended because the rest of the criminals, they realized they weren't going to be able to do what their friends. So out of 2,000 people, they killed 300 on the spot, and the crime went lower than it had gone before, right? And that's how you resolve your problem with this Intifada thing. You know who the ones making trouble? You should know. You let them out of jails, right? You know their addresses, right? And in 24 hours, you can just go pick those people up, and the Intifada, and hopefully they'll resist, and you'll be able to shoot them. But at least you'll have the Intifada finished. right? And anyway, you can't please everybody. Sooner or later, the government of Israel, in order to please the United Nations, which are a bunch of criminals and gangsters to begin with, in order to please the Americans, in order to please the Pope, in order to please all these, sooner or later they're going to sell their souls to the devil and sacrifice the autonomy and religious freedom of the Jewish people. And before that happens, God's going to collapse that government. He's going to do it through the economy, he's going to do it through war, something's going to happen. Saul is not going to get his way when it comes to the future of the Jewish people. Sometimes the Israel government, you have to stand alone. I mean, you stood alone. You knew that, Iraq was preparing to create nuclear weapons. The entire world was in his favor. And once you bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactors, everybody applauded. Same thing with Hitler. When Hitler was around, a lot of people supported him. England, everybody tried to appease him. Everybody was on Hitler's side, right? And the same thing today. All these people that are saying, no, don't fight the Iranians. Those same people are going to say you were right once you deal with the Iranian nuclear threat. I mean, I cannot think of an easier solution to a big problem than the one that Israel has. Okay, because you don't have to go out and defeat a 300,000 man army. You just have to take care of 2 or 3 buildings, right? But anyway, they want to please everybody, and that's why they have all these problems. That this whole intifada is the fault of the government for letting go of these terrorists to begin with, right? It saddens me that most of the questions that I get are from Gentiles. The Jewish people are very ignorant of the Mishkan. It's depressing, right? It's depressing that the Jewish people are not interested in the Mishkan. But that's okay. I had a question about a Jewish woman that had a dream. And many times, sometimes when I speak to a person who's had a dream, for some reason I had the same dream, or I know exactly what that person has had, I'll be able to understand the dream. But not all the dreams are there to be understood, especially since we don't take the time and meditate. We're not holy like in the old days. We could understand the dreams. But when you have a dream like that, just try to remember what was the primary sentiment that you had during the dream. Did you feel danger? Did you feel joy? Did you feel fear? Right? So even though I cannot understand your dream, I can tell you, if you felt fear during the dream, that's something that you can pray about. Well, example of that is one time I had a dream and I didn't know what it meant. But I felt a certain amount of fear, right? The dream was that in the dream I was in my mother's house, and I came through the door and I looked on the ground and I could see through the floor, and underneath the floor there was a river of water flowing, and I felt fear. I thought I was going to fall into the water. And I had this unusual dream, and I woke up and I said, I prayed to God. I said, I don't even know if this dream is a religious dream, or maybe it's just what I call a pizza dream, right? A dream that you have after eating, or eating late. But I prayed to God. I said, I feel danger, and please help us, protect us from what this dream means, whatever it is. And I believe that God heard my prayer. About a week later, I went to my mother's house, and as I came into the house, I looked on the floor. There was no hole on the ground. There was no running river. But as I came into the kitchen, I looked up and I could see the apartment upstairs. Half the floor was gone, and I could see right into the other apartment. Apparently, a leak of water had developed over the years, and the whole floor was ready to fall down on my parents' head. and they had discovered the sagging floor, and Mr. Blackman had, that's my 101-year-old, my mother's landlord. They were fixing the floor, and they had chopped the bad wood out. They were ready to put new wood, so you could see right up into the floor. So you could see how the dream made sense. I mean, looking back on it, right? Running water, the leak, right? You could see through the floor, the hole, right? But I believe that even though I could not interpret that dream, by me praying to God and asking Him for protection, it could have fallen. The whole thing could have fallen on my parents' head, and it didn't. So even though you cannot interpret the dream, during the dream, if you feel a certain sentiment of foreboding or an anticipation it could be a positive anticipation. You can pray to God to let you understand the dream, or you could pray to God to protect you from what the dream means, okay? So not always are you going to be able to interpret the dream. Somebody had asked me about the spiritual world. Oh, I had a Christian asking me about how to do curse. That's something that I don't talk about like this, because a lot of people misunderstand it. A lot of Christians get very upset. Oh my goodness, what are you talking about, cursing somebody? And then you show them where the Lord and Savior was walking, right? He placed the curse on the tree, and the tree died a few hours later, or whatever. This is cursing. I mean, the reason you have a negative idea of that, right? In the world, people, the witches and all these false religions, they talk about curses. That's when God talks about a curse. That's something different. All right, so at least have an open mind, right? Paul talks about taking that wicked person, and handing them over to Satan. That's what he meant. That's a curse. You can do a curse that way. But that's a sort of topic that I teach face to face, because then you'll have also the copycats wanting to copy, and they actually, create this confusion. And somebody asked about the spiritual world. The spiritual world is not just spiritual. I mean, the spiritual world is not just perception. And this is where I get it's kind of dicey, because I don't want you to misunderstand me as being mystical. Yes, at the beginning it's a mental experience. All right? At the beginning it's a spiritual experience. But then that spiritual experience starts altering the physics around you. Like in my case, for example, sometimes if the Shekinah is with me, it actually begins to rain. And if you're in the room, if you're close enough, like 5 or 6 feet, you'll feel the rain. So it's not just mental. It's not just the physics. It's hard to describe that. Like if I drop a glass, it'll fall just right. It won't fall sideways. If I happen to drop a knife, it will always stick on the ground. One time I was at Burger King and I pointed at an ice cream. The ice cream just flew out of the person's hand toward. In other words, the physics around you, it first starts changing. First, it starts changing face to face. Then you change occurs 4 feet away from you, and finally, that Shekinah around you increases, right? And physics, the physics becomes altered all around you. Metals. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to be able to make copper reappear and disappear. And physics changes. It's a reality. Spiritual world is a reality. All right, and if you become a spiritual person, sooner or later, that Shekinah is going to alter all the physics around you, including how you make money, how you prosper. All right, I just don't want you to misunderstand me as I'm talking mystical. I'm not trying to be mystical with you, but the spiritual world is all around you, and the physics actually gets altered around you. Because that's what you're doing, right? You're bringing the Shekinah into the world. The Shekinah comes into the world and starts altering physics around you. And that is seen in people being healed. You were asking me about angels and stuff. How do you see angels? The angels are sort of kind of tricky, because they don't want you they don't want you to notice them. But I want you to remember something. Right in front of you, there is always an angel that you can see. You just don't realize that he's there. And one of their favorite ways of hiding, maybe I shouldn't say this. Angels like to hide in the form of objects. Right? because they know you won't look at them. You won't look for them. There may be an object around you that's an angel. He'll hide as an object. And there's a way to notice it. I'm not going to teach you like this way. There's a way to know. There's always a portal open around you to the spiritual world, from the spiritual world, and that portal is in front of you. It's visible. You just don't see it. It's in plain sight, though, and that's the tricky part. The angels, that's one of the tricks. I hope they don't get upset, but that's one of the tricks that they use as objects. And I've trained myself to be able to find the portal. The idea is to go in through that portal back and forth and grab whatever tools that you need in the spiritual and bring them into the physical world. That's the whole point of that. But anyway, yeah, I wanted to talk to Jeremy. Jeremy has been asking me questions. He's a young person. He's 16 years old. He's the son of evangelical Zionist pastor. And Jeremy's been practicing Judaism. You told me in your letter that you put on the tali, then you practice being Jewish with the tali. This is the same Jeremy that told me, kid, he become Jewish and still believe in Jesus. And Jeremy's learning, right? He prays to the one and only true God, right? And he's learning he's just 16 years old, and he's learning, he loves Israel, and he's learning about the Torah, right? It's a long, Jeremy, it is a long path, but it's a path filled with fruit, right? Filled with sweet things for you, all right? So be patient, and when the time comes, I'll help you convert if your Papa lets you. In the meantime, stay close to your Papa and help him to do all the things that he has to do, so you'll turn into a wonderful, mature man. Okay, so Haverim, I just wanted to go on the internet and bless you this way. And we'll be in touch. All right? Shalom. Shalom Aleichem.